Thanks, Anne. I'll bring the microphone down to my size. I'd like to invite our panelists to come up to stage. Sanjeev Chatrath of Thomson Reuters, please come on up. Brian Henderson from Baker McKenzie. Lâle Kesebi with Fung. David Thomas with Manulife Financial. And Shirley with PwC, China and Hong Kong. Good morning, everyone. We have a gender diverse panel. I know for a lot of people in corporations, actually trying to work out the panels so they're top notch and also gender diverse is the new challenge and pleasure that we all have. In any case, when I think of disruption, and I started looking up definitions of disruption in the dictionary, to me it's a word that's kind of rough. It feels like sandpaper, it's hard, it's a little bit brutal. But disruption could be a nice thing. It could be change, it could be empowerment, it could be developing new ideas. So I kind of wanted to explore that within your own industries today, and also in terms of the gender issue. So Sanjeev, if I can start with you. I know that at Thomson Reuters you've been thinking a lot about gender diversity, management, and evening out the way things have been done in what was a very traditional company. So how do you approach disruption and gender diversity as a theme?
Sure, very happy to. Firstly, thanks, Tara, for inviting us over here. I've actually been coming to this conference for a number of years, and I think I was making the observation to you as I entered that I've never seen this conference to be as big as it is right now. So firstly, kudos to you for remarkable turnout over here, and I think the work that you're doing with the Chamber. To your question about what I see from a disruption point of view, I think massive amount of disruption, and Anne kind of alluded to some of that. But frankly, that disruption is not new. If any of us have been in the industry for the last many years, I think disruption's always been there in different shapes and form, whether it's technology changes, political changes, geopolitics, regulatory, etc. There's all kinds of disruptions happening all the time. Perhaps the one change that has been happening, which is more acute than ever before, is the pace and the speed with which that disruption is happening. And I think, again, something that Anne alluded to. I do want to call out, though, that while there has been tremendous change in terms of the pace of that disruption, one thing that continues to be glacial is the representation that you have across gender. And that has always been very, very slow. I mean, there's a lot of studies that have already been there about how potentially it will take about 170 years, if at all, for us to get there in terms of gender equality. Actually, a lot of the more recent news is even more discouraging, and it is quite sobering. So with a lot of the disruption that's happening, if you think about how technology is helping to automate and disrupt jobs, statistics tell us that for every new job that's created in a male-dominated area, 3 traditional jobs are taken out. But for every new job that's created in a female-dominated area, 5 jobs are taken out.
There's a lot of people you could hire in here, I'm sure.
I'm sure. But I make that point because if it did not direct technology, if it did not include that representation which is representative of the communities we work in, there is a very real risk that glacial pace is actually going to be even slower. And we can talk at length about what's the impact of that. But I thought I'll make that point given the focus of this particular conference being around women and what needs to be done to embrace that disruption to actually level the playing field a little bit, because without that, I think there is a real risk. You asked me about Thomson Reuters, but I don't want to take a lot of the time from this particular panel because I want to keep it flowing. And if you have any questions, happy to take one afterwards.
Absolutely. So Shirley, the glacial pace of bringing in diversity, not fitting in with the fast pace of society right now. Another issue is the complexity of the business environment. So while people are trying to get their heads around new technology, increased competition in a globalized world, you now have this complexity in terms of business. So how do you navigate that in this era of disruption?
Right, thank you. Yeah, complexity takes a different meaning in Hong Kong, China, because China is even more complex than elsewhere in other countries. I just came back from the US, San Francisco, the valleys. And as I compare the issues in Hong Kong, China, it's actually even more complex. There's a lot to be said and to be done. And I think, innovation, technology, workforce of the future, investments, areas to invest in. These and our attitude towards solving a problem are all things that we need to work through. And I think from our perspective, because we're a professional services firm, we rely heavily on our people. They're our number one asset. So really focusing on the workforce and the meaning of the workforce and what that composite of the workforce means is critically important for us. And it's about embracing this workforce. So I think from our diversity and inclusion is absolutely a priority for us. In the last year, since our new global CEO, Bob Moritz, came on board, he changed the leadership team to be 50% female. I like to think that it's not just because of an affirmative action that most of us got there, but I think, that's leadership commitment to do that. And I think it goes beyond gender as well. I like to see diversity and inclusion to include other race, sex, lesbians, gays, genders, whatever, right? I think it's a bigger topic. The reason this is important is, as we talk about technology and innovation, people think about technology changes. It isn't just about technology changes. When I think about innovation, it is about how we do things differently. It isn't just about technology. A lot of it has been focused on technology, but technology is just a tool. It is about how we do things differently. If you look at the Ubers and Airbnbs, it isn't the technology that's make them important. It's the use of a gig economy. It's that use that idea of that empty room in your house and rent it out as a hotel room. It's that idea that's the innovation. So what kind of people do you need to bring that idea together? And how do you bring that business idea with the technology? And how do you connect it? And how do you market to the mass? That's important. And from our perspective, or my perspective at least, then you need a different kind of people. You need a connector, what I term as super connectors. Okay, so these super connectors, who would have the best attributes to be these super connectors? It would be people who has a better understanding, more embrace of different types of people, be it technology, be it customers, be it whatever, people who are articulate, great communication skills, creative, who can think out of the box, who can just connect various things. And fortunately, I think a lot of women fall into that category of super connectors. And I'm not just saying this is a role for women. I'm not saying that at all. I think it's a role for men, women, lesbians, gays, whatever. I think we all live in this world together and we have to embrace and love each other. We can be happy about it or we can be unhappy about, I can go on and on, so I think I should leave the time to Brian, who will talk about my disruption to his business.
I'd like to hear more about that, but we've got gender diversity connectors. And speaking of connections, one of the pleasures I've had at the Chamber is connecting with so many different sectors of business. And I've been learning a lot about the law world, Brian Henderson. I always think of it as traditional, thoughtful, etc. But I realize that you guys are going through a lot of change based around technology and disruption. So how does it feel to be doing that?
Yeah, thanks very much, Tara. So, lawyers have a lot of problems. Being traditional is definitely one of them. One of my favorite quotes is Charles Darwin, who said, "It's not the strongest of the species that survive or the most intelligent, but the most adaptable to change." And we are having change forced on us by, everybody on this panel are disrupting my business one way or the other, guys. Some of you don't realize, but so we're getting, one of our challenges is that law firms are actually relatively small. It's a very fragmented industry. So although we've been consolidating for at least the last 10 or 15 years, no law firm has more than 2% market share globally. Where Sanjeev's organization is probably 5 times bigger, and PwC are probably 10 times bigger, and the tech companies way beyond that. So they have massive budgets to invest in setting up competing law firms. In the case of PwC, using big data to eat into parts of our service delivery. And so on. So we have a lot of pressure from that side. We also get a lot of pressure from our clients who want everything done quicker, faster, cheaper, and also from our people who, our people want to have different lifestyles, different career tracks. They want to be able to use technology in the way they use it at home, which we're not able quite to deliver yet. And also from government. So in China, for example, they have the first online court that was just set up recently. So members of the public can submit their case online, send all the documents to the judge. The judge will then set up the equivalent of a Skype call, and they'll get all the parties online together, and he will hear the parties out and make his judgment And that's a real challenge for us as lawyers who are used to piles and piles of paper and wheeling it along to court and turning up with our funny wigs or whatever. And the technology, artificial intelligence and big data, we are using that. Talking about connectivity, we did a big data crunch recently to find out which of our partners were most connected with other partners in the business to see who's really driving the growth. And actually what we found was a lot of our female partners are the most connected, in fact. They do that just intuitively. And they are driving a lot of business and a lot of growth. So we're getting a lot of really great insights into how we need to evolve our business model in light of all these different challenges.
Do you feel like you have to drag your firms and your partners into change, or is it just happening because, as you said about Darwin, you have to adapt or die?
Yeah, look, I don't think we've got any choice. I think if we want to stay in business, then we have to change because our people will vote with their feet, our clients will vote with their feet as well. And I don't want to pinch Lâle's punchline, but Lâle said this week that the difference between innovation and disruption is when it's like a white knuckle ride and you're only just hanging in there. And we're at that point. I think it feels a little bit white knuckle for lawyers at the minute. So maybe because we're just not cut out to deal with change because we haven't had the change for so long.
I like that idea of the white knuckle ride, every day feeling like one. Lâle, I think in terms of retail, many of us in the room get it. We really see that change from needing to go to a store or looking at a catalog to shopping online. But tell me a little bit about how big disruption has been, all the way from the supply chain into the things we buy in a shop.
I think short of a very long explanation, I think the one word would be massive. So if you think about your own experience as a consumer, when was the last time you waited 3 months for anything to order something in mail order?
When I bought a sofa at John Lewis in London about 10 years ago.
Correct. Or if my colleague who's in the room who loves Kickstarter, perhaps a Kickstarter project, right, which is a completely different way. So it's massive. And there is yet to be determined what is the perfect sort of retail consumer model in this era that we're talking about. And I think there will be a million of them. There will not be one. So anything from here, I mean, the supercomputers that are in our pocket, this is how we're going to buy in the future. This is where we're going to pay. And if you look at China, this is where everyone is paying currently. You can't operate with cash in China anymore. And then how you're going to procure your products, to how you're going to track your products, to how you're going to customize those products will happen here. So the knock-on effect to, let's say, a supply chain of how you get those products and how you deliver the products is equally massive. So what used to be a 9-month lead time to produce a good in a factory is shrinking to 5 days. And over time, if you believe in the futurists, it will shrink to minutes as you can 3D print your gown that you've customized online and it appears in your home without there being an intermediary at all. So it's massive. The one thing I will say as it relates to disruption and diversity, it never ceases to amaze me the number of traditional retailers currently who are servicing probably about 75% of the consumer base being female as the buying agent in their households, not having that representation at their executive teams and not having that representation at their boards. To me, the disruption is simply because you do not have your customer journey at the center of your organization. If you acknowledge who your customer is, you will have your customer represented in the air that you breathe as you are making executive decisions. So that is a fundamental change that we will see happening, I think, with retailers over time if they want to compete. The second thing is that if we continue to talk about disruption, it's like we're all on the Titanic going down. The lifeboats are being manned by the startups who've decided that, well, I saw that iceberg coming and I don't need to wait till the violin is playing. I'm going to heave off and do my own thing. The innovators are already figuring out not how to survive, but how to thrive. So the disruption conversation is happening with incumbents. The innovation conversation is happening with people who are looking at new ways to solve problems. And we need to embrace the innovation conversation, not the disruption conversation, if we want to thrive. Very
interesting. And what I'm noticing so far, the recurring theme is people. whether they're connectors, diverse, getting it, or able to take things that next step. So David, that leads me to you, an HR professional. But I just want to understand how you find those people, how you bring them up within an organization and make sure they're the ones who are now making the decisions.
Well, I think it's definitely getting tougher. So I represent Manulife. We work in insurance, wealth and asset management. And these are businesses that we've been traditionally very successful in. But unless we change the way we engage with our customers, unless we change and develop some of our people, we won't be successful in the future. The reason we've been successful is we have great personal relationships. You know, we have agents who meet with individuals, they engage one-on-one. That model is developed into involving partnership with banks, but increasingly more and more customers want to engage digitally. And we are probably, or a few years ago, one of the most undigital companies going. So not only do we have to attract people who are different, people who are innovative in a culture which has traditionally been very traditional, we're also having to bring up 35,000 people internally, 70,000 agents to embrace the digital model as well. Now, for those of you who live in Hong Kong, you know insurance is not one of the sexiest industries in the world. Young graduates do not want to come and join us. So we also have to understand what it is that makes people want to work for organizations and organizations like ours. So culture is important. The ability to bring their genuine self to work, whether it's wearing jeans, whether it's working from home. Presenteeism doesn't matter anymore. So we have to be able to embrace every single individual if we've got a hope of being successful in 2018, let alone 2028. Because the best talent has choices. Yeah? So we have to have the best of being a large organization, but also being the best of being a small entrepreneur. But the war for talent, which McKenzie talked about a long time ago, has never been tougher.
So my next question, all of you successful executives, busy people, right? I mean, traveling around Asia, keeping your head around staff and budgets, etc. How do you embrace disruption? How do you keep that in the forefront of what you're doing and how you're setting strategy every day when you're fighting the emails and everything else that's going on? Sanjeev?
I think it's an easy answer. You surround yourself with people who are smarter than you. If I was pretending to be managing everything across the region, I'll be living in a fool's paradise, right? So I think we've got to be very thoughtful about where you get the best talent. And I think the best talent is around us all the time. I want to build on something that David said earlier, that is it really harder for us to find a lot of good talent? I'll probably disagree to a little bit because I don't think it necessarily is. We make it harder for ourselves because systematically the entire organization and the professional community is set up in a manner that we have biases that go through every level of the organization. And hence it does get much harder to find the talent, mentor the talent, nurture the talent, and build up the talent. So I think if we are very systematic about how we are going to identify talent, if we try and level that playing field, whatever be the mechanism of doing it, either when we intake people, how we promote the people, how we give them the best opportunities, or even recognizing you need flexibility in the new world, which is getting disruptive, and hence you probably don't need to have as much face time with your managers as previously you needed to. If we directed our investments using the technology to make it easier for people to be themselves, the point that David was making earlier, while contributing to their professional careers, I think you will attract top talent. And I'm proud of the fact that we have been consistently rated for a number of years as one of the best companies for women to work. Not because, it's being run by women, it's just that it becomes a bit more easier for people to bring their true selves and be themselves and also pursue the balance between their personal and professional lives.
So Shirley, in your busy schedule, how do you remember and make sure you're embracing disruption?
I mean, I think coming back to this topic in disruption and talent, I agree talent's the most important thing. And I have a very simplistic view about talent. I don't strive for the best talent. I don't believe there's such thing as the best talent. I think every organization is quite similar in terms of your composition. You have some super smart, highly motivated people, and then you have some that are smart but probably less motivated and probably wants a certain lifestyle, and then you have some are probably just want to have a job. I think that's all fine. I think that's absolutely all fine because you can't have everyone who is a high achiever because then they'll be fighting with each other. So I think the way that I look at the business, given the busy schedule, it's really there's a place for everybody. You know, in the past, especially in Asia, there's a culture of you can't fail. You know, you must succeed because Chinese parents don't like the kids to fail. We don't allow our staff to fail. So what I find is we take the most talented and enthusiastic graduates into our organization. A year later, I'm like, what happened? What happened to that young, highly motivated individual? We mechanized them. And I think going forward, we just have to change, let people be who they are, especially as we work to the workforce of the future. They will want different things and how we wanted things, because, you know, I guess people generally more well-off, more, you know, are looking for something. Everyone looks for something different, and we just have to embrace that. As long as you embrace that, it makes things easy, because you're not fighting with them. You're not fighting, how do I turn this person into a type A personality? Well, there's nothing wrong with a type B personality. They do just exceedingly well as a type A if you put them in the right environment. I mean, I'm type A, but I think many type B people can do much better than me. So it is, once you embrace, I know it sounds really simplistic, but it is about having that big heart to embrace something that's simple. I think the more you make it complex for yourself, the harder it is. You have to simplify everything that you do. Well, I feel like that's what I do, because I'm so busy, you can't complicate everything. You have to make everything really simple. If that's what they're like, that's fine. Let's create an environment where they can be successful being that. If they want to have flexible working hours, that's perfectly fine, right? Give them flexible hours and give them a different career path. They can do different things. Everybody have their own talent, and we just have to embrace that. I know it sounds really motherhood, but can be as simple as that.
I think for me, the main challenge is that, particularly in Asia, you know, people look to the management to tell them the way forward, what's the answer, what's the future, and frankly, the management has no clue. If you're looking at a bunch of baby booming 50-something, mainly male, I mean, God help us, frankly.
The secret is out.
You know, so I think for us the challenge is to try and create a culture and environment where the younger members of the team feel actually if they've got an idea, they can go play with it, they can make a proposal, they can make that suggestion, and that management will actually encourage that, listen to it. And we may or may not adopt it, may or may not be the right thing for the business, but if we're not hearing those ideas coming up from the bottom, then we're really in trouble.
So can I just build on, because I do think the one thing that we have to do is avoid complacency, particularly for organizations that have been successful for a while. Because that question around why do we need to change? What's the burning platform? And that's the big risk, I think, every day where we see the need for change. Even if we're not feeling disrupted, we as leaders have to disrupt because complacency will kill. And that's I think, is going to be one of the big opportunities around increasing inclusion and diversity in the workplace, because there'll be no choice. Because as Brian says, people in leadership roles now don't have all the answers. So we have to create burning platforms and sometimes scare people.
I think that I couldn't agree with you more on the burning platform. I've said this before. Greg, who's in the audience, is going to laugh because he's heard this line before. I think most people in corporations think that the burning platform is in-floor heating. It's nice and toasty warm. You know, this is awesome. I think, though, that I would probably not agree on the complacency side of it. I think the majority of people in large organizations don't even understand the why of the change. And I think it's important for senior leaders, if you really are single-mindedly focused, so to your question, Tara, of what do I do every day, it's a single reminder of why are we doing what we're doing, why now, which is the urgency with that, and equally importantly, what does winning look like? How do you paint the picture of what winning looks like for the organization? And then how do you backwards plan from that? I actually think everyone in the organization is an innovator. I think every human being has got a great idea and will participate when they are aligned with a much bigger idea than themselves that they want to be a part of. The key is knowing what that is, what that success looks like, and then enabling your organization to innovate and find their way to that. The answers will not come from the senior management team. That's where the direction comes. That's where the commitment comes. But the answers will come from the organization.
I would agree with that. And I think as leaders, we need to embrace this change agenda, the disruption and the burning platform. But I don't necessarily think it's necessary to cascade down to every single level because it scares people. At the end of the day, we want to, I think things happen really quickly now. I think there's a burning platform every day. And when we talk about it, we say it with so much fear. And actually, that's not happy. The way I see it, we have to be happy and we need to be motivated in what we do. So as leaders, we certainly need to be on top of the agendas and move really quickly, embrace everything. But how we communicate, how do we build the platform for our people to flourish? I think that's important. And I think injecting fear is probably not, personally, I don't think that's the right way. I think we need to let people do what they want to do, be successful in what they do. And as leaders, we manage that platform, manage that process. And another thing I want to bring out is really about the ecosystem. We talk a lot about the ecosystem, but it really does work if we really, try harder. That ecosystem, be Brian's business and our business. I could be disrupting his business by setting up a law firm, but there are many things we could work together as well because now we understand law better. We could refer a different type of work that we can't do to Brian better than before. So embrace that as well. It's a scary idea, but it doesn't have to be, right? So I think nowadays, in order to make things work, it is your ecosystem. How well you establish ecosystem. Your competitors can be your friends. It can be your subcontractors, can be your buyers. And I think bringing all that together is quite powerful. And you need different kind of personas to bring that together. It's not a technology person. It isn't a tough CEO. It isn't that. It's that connection content I thought I'd talk about earlier as well.
We're running low on time, but we've got some motivated executives up here. So we'll go Sanjeev, Brian, and then David to wrap it up.
Yeah, I saw all of us have picked up the mic, so I'm not sure you'll have enough time
You're
to get through all of
motivated.
us. So
That's
we'll
good.
try and keep it short. So I absolutely agree with what Lâle and Shirley was saying. Something, Shirley, you said at the start about looking at not as competitors, but trying to see how you can build together. I think it's very, very true. And I keep going back to this plug about diversity and how diversity has a role to play in having better performance, even in the world of disruption. The reality is, whatever statistic you look at, whether it's senior management, whether it's board representation, whether it's Fortune 500 companies or companies here in Asia, there is lack of representation. Now, and we like it or not, we've got to make a deliberate effort towards it. The fact that 85% of the senior execs and board members in the US are white male, again, no disrespect to anyone, it's reality. And is that representative of the community? No. Similarly, here in Hong Kong, I'm part of the 30% club. One of the commitments we've made is trying to work towards having 0 companies on the Hong Kong exchange which has got 0 female board. And now that again is reality. We're working to get to about 20% representation in Hong Kong boards. And I make that point because you need everybody to play the part, and hence, if their business case is still not clear, maybe we need to drum that beat louder so people can understand that asset managers making choices of where they're making investments based on diversity and inclusion indices nowadays. Consumers are becoming more aware on what kind of a company, employees are becoming more aware what kind of companies they want to be working for. And hence, the business case has never been as sharp as it is right now. I think there is no doubt a lot of resistance. Some of that is conscious. A lot of it, I'll give the benefit of doubt, is unconscious. But if we are not going to be deliberate about it, we are going to transport all that was wrong in the previous version, and hence the glacial pace, and we'll bring it to the new generation of the modern world, which is exactly what's happening right now. So if you look at technology, and the point that was made about smartphones, why is it even till now, if you look at your personal assistants, the default voice that comes out is a female voice? Now, is that a bias? I don't know. But clearly, there is some stereotyping that sits around many of these things. And I think we have to call it out because we've targeted women primarily as users and not in the design of a lot of our solutions. And that is just one example. So I don't want anybody to walk away thinking mobile phones or technology is bad, but we have to be a lot more deliberate about how do you level that playing field so that you are eliminating those biases that structurally exist within our organizations and in the industries.
I just wanted to pick up on the ecosystem point that Shirley made. So we have a partner in Toronto who opened a collaboration space, and he got President Trudeau along to launch it, very high profile. And he's got a mix of our clients. We've got technologists, we've got futurists, we've got design thinkers. So we have this, startups, tech startups, a whole little ecosystem that he's bringing in to help our clients solve their tough business challenges. But when we tell that story, my partner's going, I have no idea what a futurist is, but in a future life, I'd like to come back as one. So the point is they have no clue what this whole ecosystem collaboration thing is, how to engage with it, or how to manage it. And I think when I talk about my Darwin quote, that's one of the things I have in mind. So for this generation to really get their heads around that and figure out how do we just manage all of these complex relationships in a totally different way is a massive, massive challenge. So the ones who figure that one out are the ones that will succeed.
David.
I had one comment and one request. So Sanjeev kind of kicked off by saying disruption is not new. And actually the best book I've still read on disruption is a very simple book called The Iceberg is Melting by John Cotter. It's about a colony of penguins. I recommend you read it. It's still as relevant today as it was 20 years ago. My request is disruption really starts at a personal level, an organizational level. So the three of us, the male members of the panel, we're part of the male allies of the Women's Foundation. We're trying to get involved. All of you represent organizations that are either involved already or could get involved. Be disruptive internally. Ask the questions. Ask your CEOs. Ask your chairman. Are you going to get involved? What can you do to help? This disruption on gender is not just a women's issue. We're all involved because we understand if we're going to change, if we're going to have a 30% club, a 40%, 50, 60%, the revolution starts now. So please help us.
And on that note, so the terms that I've heard today, connecting, diversifying, understanding what's happening throughout your organization, having a bit of fun and smiling through it all, reading and thinking through things intelligently, that is quite different from the thought about what I have as a definition of disruption when we started this session. So I'd like to thank you all very much for joining us. I'm sure we can continue this theme throughout the day, and definitely at the chamber, one thing I've noticed is that people really want to learn more about so-called soft skills because organizations require a very different type of agility than they used to. So that's my one plug. We have a membership stand outside here today, and if you do join the chamber, you will have a WI discount. We'd love to have you, and I'd really like to thank all of you. Sanjeev, Shirley, Brian, Lâle, and David, thanks very much for sharing your views.